election and then thereafter said that
Canada should honestly become our 51st state.
Which is never going to happen.
Pierre Poilievre, leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition. There's a quite significant probability that you could be Canada's next leader, and your team said, I can ask you whatever I want.
Okay.
So it appears that the United States have made the decision to kind of go it alone in the world.
And that is a very big strategic mistake. In Canada's case, we have everything the United States needs if they treat us like a friend. So for example, we have the fourth biggest supply of oil. And if you look at the leading five, which of these countries do you think the United States can most rely on?
And I'm looking at the third vial there in the row, Iran. Has Trump taken the right course of action?
The Iranian government has been extremely hostile and very dangerous to Canada. They are the leading world sponsor of terrorism. And there's no doubt in my mind that the only reason that they are enriching uranium is for the purpose of developing a weapon. And there's a far greater risk to them having a nuclear weapon than even North Korea. So the initial actions were definitely necessary.
But how do you think this plays out? And if Trump had called you and asked for your support, would you have given it?
Well, let's put it this way.
What is the thing that you're most concerned about?
We're overtaxing our population. We're punishing initiative. We have 20,000 immigrant doctors who can't work in medicine. Wages have been destroyed. Young people can't start a family in this economy. And that is why the working class across the Western world is so angry. The good news is we can reverse all of that.
And the other thing that I actually was really keen to talk about is this. Wow. I can see the emotion in your face.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that in a while.
This is super interesting to me. My team give me this report to show me how many of you that watch this show subscribe. And some of you have told us, according to this, that you are unsubscribed from the channel randomly. So favor to ask all of you, please could you check right now if you've hit the subscribe button, if you are a regular viewer of the show and you like what we do here. We're approaching quite a significant landmark on this show in terms of a subscriber number. So if there was one simple free thing that you could do to help us, my team, everyone here, to keep this show free, to keep it improving year over year and week over week, it is just to hit that subscribe button and to double check if you've hit it. Only thing I'll ever ask of you. Do we have a deal? If you do it, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll make sure every single week, every single month, we fight harder and harder and harder and harder to bring you the guests and conversations that you want to hear. I've stayed true to that promise since the very beginning of the Diary of a CEO, and I will not let you down. Please help us. Really appreciate it. Let's get on with the show. Pierre Poilievre, leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition. There is so much I want to talk to you about. I think you have a truly fascinating formative childhood, one of which I've really seldom seen on this show, especially when the person rises so high in their political ambitions. But I think the most appropriate thing to start with, because it's just front of mind for me at the moment, is what the hell is going on in the world? And I mean, that's genuinely, I'm up all night trying to figure out if we're on the verge of World War III, what's going on with all these alliances we used to have. What is going on in the world?
The history starts really in the post-war period with the massive increase in the power and the wealth of the United States. They unleashed the capitalist system. They effectively buried the Soviet Union just by out-hustling, out-producing, and outgrowing until the Soviet Union collapsed. And then a new authoritarian power snuck up on the United States. China went from having 80% of its population living on less than $1 a day to being the second biggest economy in the world. And at the same time, the American working class has been thoroughly screwed over by relentless money printing that has inflated their cost of living while also inflating the wealth of a small group of elites. And I think this resulted in a major pushback. Now, some of that was justified, that pushback is justified, but I also think some of it is very much unjustified. Tariffing countries like Canada makes no sense. If you're the United States, you should want more friends, more trade with those friends. And that's one of the reasons why I've been touring the United States, to make the case for Canada and to remind our American friends that they are stronger working with countries like Canada and the United Kingdom than they are pushing those natural allies away.
It appears that the United States have made the decision to kind of go it alone in the world. I mean, I was at Davos and I saw what Trump said. I saw a variety of things in the lead up to their talking about taking Greenland, turning Canada into one of the United States' 51st states. Is that what he said? 51st state?
That's never going to happen.
It seems to be very adversarial. And through my childhood and through my adulthood and over the last 30 years, the US has always been the strong ally, not an individualistic, isolated force in the world. What's going on here?
I think that is a very big strategic mistake. I think America would be better off working with the traditional Western alliance that helped win the Cold War. We had a very big menace, a nuclear-armed Soviet Union that was expansionary. Its empire was pushing eastward into Europe, and the response of the United States was to build a strong NATO alliance and then to unleash its economy to just outproduce the Soviets and bring them to their knees. In Canada's case, we have everything the United States needs if they treat us like a friend. We have the fourth biggest supply of oil.
You can see it here.
That's right. We could maybe pull that over here. This is the oil reserves by country. As you can see, Canada is number 4. And after us is Iraq and then the United States. But if you look at the leading 5, which of these countries do you think the United States can most rely on? Is it Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Iran, or Iraq? No, it's Canada. It works very well with American refineries, and we sell it to the United States at an enormous price discount. Furthermore, we could build up an enormous reserve of this oil so that if, God forbid, the Strait of Hormuz were to be closed, just a random example, America's friends in neighboring Canada would have a couple hundred million barrels that are already produced and ready for use if it's needed. So this is really kind of rocket fuel for the Canadian economy, but it's strategically important for our American friends. We could cooperate better on this if we got a friendly posture and a fully tariff-free trade arrangement with the U.S.
What's interesting when I look at these vials of oil that we have on the table, and I see that Venezuela is number 1, Saudi Arabia is number 2, Iran, Canada, Iraq, and then the US, is a lot of these countries that have a lot of oil are in conflict with the United States right now.
That's right.
And now, as I look at this, it seems like I understand why. So Venezuela, I mean, Trump just flew in and took the leader of Venezuela and his wife out of bed and seized the country. Iran, the US are at war with Iran now. Iraq, I mean, that's a story already. And Canada has been the other one where it's been incredibly adversarial over the last couple of months. Is this just all about oil?
Frankly, we don't really understand what the dispute with Canada is about because we've been a very good and friendly partner to the United States ever since the early 1800s, before we even formed as a confederation. What I would say to Americans, though, is you shouldn't have to worry about all of these countries if you're working collaboratively with Canada and you're trading freely with a separate country to the north, then you will not be bound by what happens in these other less stable and arguably more hostile countries. What I believe we as Canadians need to do is use our natural resources as leverage to get what we want from this administration and future ones. What we want is tariff-free trade for our steel, aluminum, lumber, and automobiles. And in exchange for that, we can produce more oil and sell more of it at better prices to the United States of America. Oil is only one part of it. There's also the strategic minerals that are necessary for, God forbid, modern warfare. And we have those as well. We are a resource superpower, and I want to leverage that to get what we want from the US and from other nations.
I'm looking at the third vial there in the row, Iran.
Mm-hmm.
Has Trump taken the right course of action in bombing Iran in the way that he has? And the other question that's, I think, on everyone's mind is like, how do you get out of this? Is this going to end well?
The Iranian government has been extremely hostile and very dangerous to Canada. They killed 55 Canadian citizens and 30 permanent residents by shooting a civilian aircraft out of the sky, PS-752, for reasons we still do not understand and with no explanation whatsoever. They have unleashed agents into our communities and streets to harass the Jewish and Persian communities of Canada. And they are the leading world sponsor of terrorism. It is absolutely unacceptable for the Iranian government to ever acquire nuclear weapons. And there's no doubt in my mind that the only reason that they are enriching uranium is for martial purposes. There's no need to enrich it to the degree they have in order just to have nuclear power plants. I have no doubt that they were doing it for the purpose of developing a weapon. And if that were to happen, it could be catastrophic for neighboring countries, but also for faraway lands if given the ability to develop long-range missiles. So my view and the view of the Canadian government is that the Iranian government cannot be allowed to develop nuclear weapons, and any action to stop them from doing that is necessary for world peace.
Was this action necessary to stop that, in your view?
I think that the initial actions were definitely necessary, particularly the bombings 4 or 5 months ago to target the nuclear development sites. But I think any actions to degrade their nuclear capabilities, prevent them from ever achieving them, is favorable. And I hope that it will weaken the regime enough for the people to overtake it and claim control of their country.
It doesn't look like that's the case. I think they've appointed the son of the Ayatollah to lead the country now, and they seem to be firing at everybody in the region. There was some reports that they might have ballistic missiles that could reach Europe as well.
Yes, and this is what we have to stop. I mean, the idea that they are carrying out this aggression simply because they've been attacked is false. They would have eventually carried it out. The question is when and with what means. And if we had just sort of slept and waited, we would have ended up with a catastrophe. This is different than North Korea. North Korea was allowed to get nuclear weapons, but they don't have the same celestial fundamentalist ideology there. Ultimately, the regime in North Korea is interested in its own survival and its power. The regime in Tehran has a theocratic dream. They believe that there's an afterlife in which they could be rewarded for carrying out mass destruction on what they call the infidels. They don't respond to deterrence the same way that Pyongyang in North Korea would. There's a far greater risk to them having a nuclear weapon than even having that in a communist totalitarian state like North Korea. But for Canada, in this environment, our superpower is, again, our resources. And that's why it has been one of my major obsessions to unblock our resources, get them to tidewater, accumulate them in a strategic reserve that would allow us to really flex our energy muscles in environments like this, and also reduce dependence on regime like Iran, like Saudi Arabia, like Venezuela.
If Trump had called you and asked for your support, had you been leading the government of Canada, would you have given the support? This is the big conversation at the moment in the UK, because Keir Starmer was reluctant to send troops originally, and it seems to have irked Trump in an interesting way.
So our Prime Minister did support the attack, and I agreed with Prime Minister Carney on that point. That is distinct from contributing Canadian soldiers, sailors, and aircrew. I'm not proposing that we send ground troops to Iran, and we are not in a position right now to supply a lot of the demands that this conflict would require. It depends on what they ask for before we get an answer from Canada on what it is that we can provide.
You're someone that knows a lot about history. You seem to know a lot about a lot, frankly. And I actually don't know a lot about a lot. So when you think through how this could go, it doesn't appear that the Iranians are going to roll over very easily. The Iranian leadership are going to roll over very easily. Trump doesn't appear to be a man that likes taking hits to his ego. So it doesn't appear that he's just going to pull out and let things unravel. And then the third option, one would say, is that they double down even further and send troops to the region. How do you think this plays out based on everything that you know about both history, about Trump, and from your pattern recognition?
Well, it could go a variety of ways. Remember the first Persian Gulf War, George Herbert Walker Bush decided that he had downgraded and penalized Saddam Hussein enough for the invasion of Kuwait. Mm-hmm. He declared victory and he moved on. And ultimately, that left a lot of stability in the region. His son then went and pursued a full out-and-out regime change, and that was a much longer enterprise. The president will have to decide which of those two Bushes he uses as a model. But I think that the important thing is to know what the objective is. For me, the objective has to be to make sure that the Iranian government never gets the capacity to send long-range nuclear missiles to countries, or even short and medium range to Israel, for that matter. Beyond that, I think it's up to the Iranian people to take advantage of the weakness of the regime and rise up and reclaim their country. I don't think this regime has popular support. I know a lot of Iranians. We're blessed to have a lot of very secular, pro-Western Persians who live in Canada, are proudly Canadian, and they will tell you that there's almost no support for the regime among the people of Iran. They need to find a way to overturn the regime, and that would give a lot of comfort and peace to the rest of the world, but it would also give democracy to a deserving people.
What would you do if you were Trump?
Oh, that's a good question.
I mean, no offense to him.
That's
You have to answer
interesting.
this.
Like I said, I would focus on the core objective of making sure that there's not a nuclear-armed Iran without getting involved in a permanent quagmire.
So everything's been bombed now. Fordo's been bombed. So is this the time to pull out then?
I think it all depends on the intelligence they have about the nuclear capacity. That is the hinge point. We cannot allow a nuclear-powered Iranian military. That is what they need to determine.
For me at the moment, it looks a little bit like it's a little bit lose-lose for Trump in an interesting way. And I think this is also reflecting the fact that nobody really has a perfect answer for what to do next, because it's all just trade-offs.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that's what the great Thomas Sowell said. There's no solutions, just trade-offs in life.
And it's hitting the price of gas at the pumps in a big way.
Yes.
A way that concerns you? Or?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because it shouldn't have to concern Canadians. Our enormous supply of oil should actually insulate us from it. Normally, what used to happen in Canada is when the global price of oil rose, our dollar would rise with it because people would be buying more of our oil, which meant they had to first buy our dollar. A more powerful Canadian dollar meant that we had more buying power for internationally priced commodities like oil and food. So we used to be protected from international oil price increases in a way that we're not anymore, because our sector is no longer as strong and as big as it was as a share of our economy. And so what I want to do is unleash oil production in Canada, clear the regulatory bureaucracy, the government gatekeepers, get rid of industrial carbon taxes, and have a stronger dollar that makes life more affordable and much more geostrategic power in the world.
There's a quite significant probability that you could be Canada's next leader. And for you to achieve all those things you've just described, you'll need to have, productive relationship with the United States.
Right.
Trump, if all follows the law, won't be able to be elected. So it'll probably be a different leader by the time that you were in power. Although I know that, there could be a vote of no confidence, which means that you could get into power earlier. Your relationship with Trump, good, bad, indifferent?
I've never met him.
Never met him? Spoken to him?
I've never spoken to him. No, I don't have. No, I made the decision that we have one prime minister at a time. And because we are negotiating a trade deal, or it's more like a review of an existing deal, I don't want our side as Canadians to be divided, even though I obviously disagree with my prime minister on a whole range of policy issues. I don't want to undermine in any way the Canadian side of the bargaining table. I would only do that kind of conversation with a teamwork with the current government. But what I've said is that our approach vis-a-vis Trump should be to focus on what we can control. So why not focus on what we can do at home? Unlock our resources, build up a strategic reserve of minerals that are important to our American friends, but also to our other allies. Clear the way to export more goods to overseas markets, build alliances with the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, to diversify and become more self-sufficient.
You keep using this word unlock.
Yes.
And clear the way.
Yes.
What are you referring to when you say clear the way and unlock?
Removing bureaucratic obstacles. The resources we have are massively profitable for the private sector to mine, refine, store, and ship, as long as they can get the permits and the low enough taxes to do it. So we need to remove those obstacles so that it now becomes possible for private investment, not subsidized by government, no handouts for business, but private investment to unlock and unblock those resources.
You're just saying that you don't want to get in the way of Mark Carney.
Well, I don't want to get in the way of negotiations with a foreign country. Obviously, my job is to to be his opposition in the House of Commons on domestic issues and even on international issues, but not to do so in a way that undermines the national interest.
A lot of countries aren't like that. It was interesting because you're on Joe Rogan's show. It's got a global audience.
Yes.
So, if you talk about him there, you're talking about him all over the world. And you said you wouldn't criticize the leader of the opposition unless you were in Canada. But that, you're reaching everybody everywhere all the time.
True. No, that's true. It's true. But I just think it's a good principle to follow, particularly during a negotiation that's happening across the border in that country. Like, I think it would be a little different if we were in normal times and there was no trade dispute, or if we were in a country with which we have no particular contention. For me to say something critical about the government's policy back home would not have any repercussions for the nation. But particularly over the next several months, while these talks are hopefully going to go on, I want to get the best outcome for Canada, and I have to put my country above myself.
Why are you better than the current leader of the Canadian government, Mark Carney? What is it you offer that is better than what he has to offer?
My mission is to make Canada the most affordable, freest and richest country in the world. My upbringing, I grew up in very humble beginnings. I grew up surrounded by working class people. Yeah, these are my folks. Yeah, that's an old one.
Got a photo of you there and your parents and your stepbrother, your half-brother?
Half-brother, yes. So it's my dad and my mother, where they were school teachers. My brother is my half-brother because we came from the same biological mother, but a different biological fathers, adopted into the same family. Kind of a complicated story.
Your biological mother adopted you at 16 years old.
Put us up for adoption at 16 years old. She was 16, and then about 3 years later, she had another little boy, and Patrick, was then adopted by the same parents.
And they were two teachers that adopted you and Patrick?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I still remember when we went to pick him up. It was, so we went to this, we got a phone call, and they said, well, there's a little boy who happens to be half brothers with Pierre. Would you like to adopt him too? And he said, absolutely. So we went over to this building, and we walk into this room, and there were all these rows of babies. And, we walked past them, and then they said, that's him right there. And that was when I met my brother. We picked him up. That's why I thought that's where babies came from. There was a store. We go to a store and get your groceries. There's a store where you can go and get a baby. That's what I thought, because that was my first experience with it. And we brought him home. And we grew up in working class neighborhoods. When I was about 3, 4-ish, we lost everything. We got smashed by high interest rates. My mother had saved up enough to buy 2 little rental properties. We lost those and our home, and had to borrow from our grandfather to get a down payment so we'd have a place to live. My dad was driving this Oldsmobile that was falling apart, and our neighbors were, working class folks. They were just, electricians, oil workers, police officers. So those are the people I grew up with. And I always grew up admiring those people, admiring what they were able to do, and believing that they were generally taken advantage of by government, never listened to, and kept on the outside of decision making. And my mission has been to bring back what I call the promise of Canada, that anyone can achieve anything. It doesn't matter if you start off as an adopted kid raised by school teachers, or an immigrant from Botswana who grows up really poor. If you work at it, you should be able to buy a house, launch a business, become a famous global podcaster, or maybe cure a disease. And that was what Canada was all about. And that is what I'm trying to reinstate.
What age do you get to meet your biological mother for the first time?
21, 22. My adopted mother was very gracious, because I said, I won't meet my biological mother without the permission of my adopted mother. She did all the work of raising me, all the hardships, she put up with all of my rambunctiousness in teenage years, and drove me to hockey practice, and, emptied her bank account to pay for our food and stuff. So I did not want her to feel like she was going to be left behind or forgotten about or replaced. And I asked her, would you be okay if I met her? And she said, yes, of course, because I won't always be here, and I always want you to have a mother. And I thought that was a really incredible thing to do, because it's such a big part of a mother's identity, is that they are the mother of that child. But to have a love that's so much deeper than that personal identity or interest is something I'll always remember. It's one of the most gracious things I've ever seen.
I can see the emotion in your face as you say it.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that in a while.
What beautiful people.
Yes, we're very blessed, and it's people like these that inspire me, that keep me going in this crazy world of politics.
So you get to meet your biological mother at 21, 22?
Yeah, around that.
Yeah. What does one say? What are the questions one needs to ask, if any?
I'm trying to remember. We went on a bit of a road trip from Ottawa to Montreal, and we just got to know each other. She had a lot of questions about how my life had been, and I had a lot of questions about our biological family, about her father, who was a really great man. I would go on to meet a great Irishman, and the circumstances that led to my my conception and birth. And I really came to understand her decision to put me up for adoption. And I've never been resentful for it at all. She was 16. She just lost her mother to a heart attack. She didn't have a lot of means, and she just made a selfless decision that we would have more opportunity if we were raised by someone else.
Did you ever learn anything about your biological father?
Yes. Yeah, he works at a concrete plant in British Columbia. And so I went and met him. He's a great father with children that he subsequently had and raised. And so he's a very good man as well. And my adoptive father is a teacher, and he gave me a lot of wonderful lessons, and I think is responsible for my way with words.
Marlene and Donald?
That's right.
So Marlene's your adoptive mother, Donald's your adoptive father. They divorced when you're 12 years old.
Yes, it would be around that time. I was in grade 5.
Very difficult time for parents to divorce. Very
Yes.
difficult time. I remember that period of life very, very clearly, because I remember one day my parents coming to me and telling me that they didn't love each other anymore and that they were going to get a divorce. They didn't.
Okay.
But I remember which, I think did enough damage, but it was around that age. And I remember where I was stood in the house. I remember what I was wearing when they said that to me, because it's earth shattering.
It is, actually.
I can't unforget it. It was traumatizing.
Well, my dad told me, and he wanted to tell me alone. So we got into the car. He said he wanted to take me for a drive, and we drove to the local corner store, and we parked in the car, and he told me that there. But it is very traumatizing, and but at the same time, like, they were very, very good parents. So I don't judge them for how they ended up apart. We were very blessed. They gave me a great start in life. Even though they weren't together, they loved us very much, and they gave us all they could.
And Donald would eventually come out as gay.
That's right.
One would assume that he was dealing with the conflict of feelings.
Yes.
For much of the time.
He had been raised in a very devoutly French Catholic household, and that's why we have a French name. And before he got married, he'd even consider going into the priesthood, and he was a very devoutly Catholic person. He genuinely loved my mother, but obviously he wasn't programmed that way. He has a wonderful partner, and we're friends with, very close with him and his partner, Ross, right now.
Do you see how that's changed you as a man? As you've grown up, whether it's your perspective on what love and romance is or anything else?
I think that if everything just been, white picket fences and, totally predictable, and then I wouldn't be the kind of person I am today. I think it's also, it's like you. Would you have been as successful as you are if you had a very easy childhood? I doubt it. I bet all the hardships that you had, and the twists and turns that took you from Botswana to the United Kingdom and then onward probably gave you some superpower. And so I think it gave me the chance to understand that you don't judge people, you love them for who they are. My parents also taught me an important lesson that Shakespeare says, "To thine own self be true." My mother when she was a small baby, she was in a car accident and her fingers were burned off, and she had horrible scars, horrible burns on her hand at the time. And as I got to my adolescence, I said to my dad, did it ever bother you when you started dating her that she had this injury? And he said, no, because it didn't bother her. She was totally at peace and she never hid it. It wasn't long after we met that I forgot it was even there. And the message that I took from that is, be yourself. Don't try to hide the scars. Scars are the trophies of survival. So those are some of the lessons that my mother and father taught me. And my dad was the same about who he was. He just lived his life unapologetically and openly, and he never apologized for who he was. And that has stayed with me.